I'm going to tell you something that might be hard to hear. Tell me if this sounds familiar. You're doing everything right in your job. You're working harder than anyone on your team. You're exceeding your goals. Your manager gives you glowing reviews. You're the first person everyone comes to when something needs to get done. And you feel absolutely stuck in your career. And what's worse, you're watching people who are less qualified, do less work, and frankly aren't as good as you or capable as you move up past you. And you're wondering, what am I doing wrong? The answer? Nothing. You're not doing anything wrong. You're just playing the wrong game. I'm Molly, and this is Protégé, the podcast where we talk about the game nobody tells you you're playing. Those invisible rules of advancement. The difference between working hard and getting chosen. And why sponsorship, not just mentorship, is what actually helps you grow in your career. Let's talk about why high performers get stuck, and more importantly, what actually gets you to the next level of your career. So here's the thing. If you're listening to this, you're probably a high performer. You've been told your whole life that hard work pays off, that excellence matters, that if you just do great work, people will notice and you'll be rewarded. And for a time, that worked. It got you into college, it got you your first job, it got you positive performance reviews and helped you reach a certain point of your career. But now you're hitting a ceiling and you're confused because the formula that got you here isn't working anymore. Here's why. When you're an individual contributor, when your job is to execute, excellence is the game. You do great work, you get recognized, you move up. The better you are at execution, the more you advance. But there's a rung in the ladder where the game changes, and most women don't see it coming. It's this phenomenon called the broken rung. Mackenzie and Lean In have been studying this for over a decade now, and the data is stark. In 2025, for every 100 men promoted to manager, only 87 women are promoted. For women of color, it's even worse. Only 74 women of color getting promoted for every 100 men. And here's what makes this devastating. This isn't happening at the executive level. This is happening at that very first step into leadership. This moment when you go from being a high performing individual contributor to being a manager and taking those first steps into leadership. This is where the pipeline breaks. Because once you fall behind at this first promotion, catching up can feel out of reach. Men outnumber women at the manager level, which means fewer women make it to director, which means even fewer make it to VP. And the result of this compounding effect is that women represent only 29% of all C-suite roles, and that number hasn't moved in over a year. At the current rate of change, we're looking at almost 50 years before we reach parity. 50 years. So what's causing this? It's not a single problem. It's a convergence of issues. First, there's a lack of sponsorship. Women get less leader advocacy. Entry-level women are less likely to be put up for promotion, less likely to be connected with someone who can help their career, less likely to have someone using their political capital to push for their advancement. And here's what makes it worse. Only 31% of entry-level women report having a sponsor, compared to about 45% of men. And when women aren't given the tools to figure out how to even start looking for someone like this, it can feel like hitting a glass ceiling even earlier in your career than you thought you would. Second, there's the skills gap that nobody talks about. High performers get promoted for their technical skills, but they never receive support to fully develop the leadership skills actually required to manage a team and grow in their career. In addition, women receive significantly less manager support to build AI proficiency, which is about 21% compared to 33% for men. And in a world where AI is a crucial skill, regardless of your job title, this can be a career killer. So they either struggle in the role or get passed over entirely because decision makers don't see them as ready. Third, there's a visibility problem. Women are doing excellent work, but they're doing it in the shadows. So when promotion decisions are made or they're putting together a new project, their names aren't coming up. Not because they're not qualified, but because nobody's thinking about them. Fourth, there's the systemic bias that's baked into this whole process. Women do experience more microaggressions. They're interrupted in meetings, they're judged more harshly, and when they exhibit leadership behaviors, they're seen as aggressive instead of assertive. And now there's a fifth factor making everything harder: delayering in the workforce. Companies are systematically eliminating these middle management positions. These are the very roles that serve as that first step into leadership, and they're disappearing. Middle management hiring has dropped by 43% this year, which means even fewer opportunities for women who are already promoted at lower rates. So, all these things converge at the broken rung. In fact, you can think of it as the broken rung meets the great flattening. And it creates this trap that most women don't even see until they're stuck in it. So let me ask you, when was the last time someone two levels above you saw your work? When was the last time an executive recommended you for a project or a promotion during a meeting you weren't in? When was the last time someone with influence actively advocated for you? If the answer is never, or you don't know, you're stuck at the broken rung, and working harder isn't going to fix it. So here's the piece nobody teaches you. Promotions and these opportunities are not just about performance, they're about advocacy. You need someone in the room when you're not in the room, saying your name, pushing for you, using their political capital as a position to advocate for your advancement. And that person, that's not a mentor, that's a sponsor. Now, I know what you're thinking. I have mentors. I have people who give me advice. I have people who help me think through my career. Great, good, that's important. But here's the distinction that changes everything. Mentors give you advice on what to do, they give you maps, feedback, instruction, advice. Sponsors give you access to opportunities. They give you the keys. They actively reach a hand back to pull you forward into the next level of your career. So mentors help you navigate while sponsors open doors. And here's the hard truth. Most women have mentors. Almost none have sponsors. You've been told your whole career to find a mentor, find a mentor. So you did. You built those relationships, you meet regularly, you get advice, and it's helpful. But advice doesn't get you promoted. Advocacy does. And that's the game nobody explained. That's the missing piece. You've been optimizing for advice when what you actually need is someone who will walk into a meeting and say, "We need to promote her," or "We need her on this project. Here's why." That's sponsorship. And that's what this podcast is about. Over the coming episodes, we're going to break down everything you need to know about sponsorship: how to identify who has the keys versus who has the maps, how to cultivate those relationships, how to convert existing mentors into sponsors, how to make yourself visible and positioned so sponsors can find you. Because it's not just about getting someone to advocate for you, it's about becoming the kind of person someone wants to invest in. Someone worth putting their time and political capital on the line for. That's the internal work, the mindset shift from individual contributor to leader. And we're going to talk about that too, because you can't just ask for sponsorship. You have to earn it. Not through hard work alone, but by demonstrating leadership potential, by showing up differently, by becoming someone sponsors want to bet on. But before we get tactical, I want to tell you a bit about who I am and why you should listen to me as I talk about this. My name is Molly, and I've spent the last decade figuring out the invisible game of advancement. And I know this game because I've lived both sides of it. I spent years in a startup environment where I was fortunate enough to have not one, but two executive sponsors: my SVP of marketing and my CTO. And I am so grateful for them because they didn't just give me advice, they actively advocated for me. The more I showed them my potential, the more they brought me onto projects they were working on. They recommended me for promotions. They put my name forward in rooms where decisions were being made. They opened doors I wouldn't have had access to otherwise. Under their sponsorship, I went from being a product marketing manager to a director. I built and led my first team, which was such a rewarding experience. I learned what it meant to lead with both empathy and effectiveness. And it was so rewarding to build and lead a team from scratch, to be right at the center of considering the needs of the company, how to build a strong team, consider the strengths and personalities and how they could complement each other, and see them succeed and grow as individuals as well. It was so fulfilling, and I'm forever grateful for the time I spent there. After a few years there, I went back to corporate. I took a role as a lead product marketing manager at a large platform tech company, which, for the record, is a pretty common move to make when you're moving back into the corporate world after startup life. And suddenly, I was back to being an individual contributor. I was working as the lead for an emerging vertical of the platform that had a lot of visibility on it. And since product marketing sat at the intersection of product strategy, go to market, and commercialization, I was typically presenting strategy and execution plans in large meetings with a lot of leaders and C suite, or I was in the room as those conversations were being had. And it was through that experience that I saw the elephant in the room. I started looking around at the leadership roles I aspired to one day and the positions I could grow to be in, and I realized almost all of those leaders were men. The gender gap was massive and undeniable. And once I saw it, I could not unsee it. So started watching all of my female colleagues around me and the paths they were taking and how they looked different from mine. They were struggling to make that leap. They were fully capable in a lot of ways, already acting as a leader within the office or within their teams, but they were struggling to land that new project or would get passed over for promotions. They were getting stuck at that broken rung. And I realized what the difference was. It wasn't competence, it wasn't work ethic, it wasn't ambition, it was sponsorship. I had experienced what it was like to have someone actively advocating for me. And now I was watching talented women who didn't have that, and they were invisible. They were delivering excellence in the shadows. And shadow work doesn't get you promoted. I also started to see something else. The women who were struggling, they weren't just missing sponsors, they were also missing that cognitive shift that happens when you go from being responsible for your own work to being responsible for a team's outcomes. That internal transformation from doer to leader. And there was no playbook for that transition. So I became obsessed with systematizing this, taking what I'd experienced and turning it into frameworks, identifying the specific actions that make sponsorship work for both sides of the relationship, breaking down the invisible game into something learnable and repeatable, and understanding the mindset shifts required to become someone sponsors want to invest in. And here's what I've learned. This isn't about natural charisma. It's not about being an extrovert. These are learnable skills, not personality traits. Networking can be strategic, not random. And once you learn the system, it becomes repeatable. So that's what this podcast is. It's the system nobody taught us. It's the frameworks for getting chosen, not just qualified. The playbook for advancement. I'm not going to just tell you to believe in yourself or be more confident or any of that generic inspirational stuff. I'm going to give you the actual tactics, the scripts, the frameworks, the data, because you're a high performer. You don't need that inspiration. You need a system. And that's what we're building here. So let me tell you what you can expect. This podcast covers 4 main areas, and together they give you the complete picture of how to advance. The first is the internal game, that mindset shift from individual contributor to leader. This is all about the cognitive reframe, going from being responsible for your own outputs to being responsible for a team's outcomes. It's about letting go of your IC identity and building that confidence without the arrogance. We're going to talk about imposter syndrome, not as something to overcome, but as a signal that you're growing. And we're going to talk about becoming someone sponsors want to bet on. Because it's not just about finding a sponsor, it's also about positioning yourself as someone who's worth the investment, someone who's worth putting political capital and their name on the line for. Second, we're going to talk about the external game, Getting seen, getting advocated for. This is where sponsorship lives. We're going to break down exactly how to identify who can open doors for you versus who can only give you advice. We're also going to talk about how to manage up strategically, how to build executive visibility without feeling like you're self promoting, how to position yourself so that when conversations happen for new opportunities to gain experience capital, your name comes up. Third, we're going to talk about influence and communication, how to influence without official authority, how to navigate organizational politics with integrity, how to build the kind of executive presence that's not just about what you wear, but how you show up, how to negotiate, not just for salary, but for opportunities, for resources, for the things that actually matter, how to use conflict productively instead of avoiding it. And fourth, we're going to talk about resilience, how to recover from toxic workplaces, how to navigate burnout without burning yourself out further, how to come back from setbacks, how to set boundaries that protect your energy without limiting your growth. This is the stuff nobody talks about, but everyone deals with. Every episode is going to walk you through a specific challenge, something you're stuck on, something that's holding you back. First of all, I want to validate that those things are hard. And I want to remind you, you're not alone in this. After we talk about that, I'm going to give you a framework, a system, a set of tactics you can actually use, not vague advice, but concrete, actionable steps. And we're going to end every episode with one specific thing you can do this week, not a list of 10 things you have to study and think about the right way you can implement. One thing, doable, immediate. Because here's what I believe. You don't need more information. You need the right information and the clarity to act on it. I'm not going to avoid the hard stuff either. We're going to talk about the issues and challenges that exist in our world today that create obstacles for your career. We're going to talk about discrimination and the double bind of being competent versus likable. We're going to name those structural barriers, not just give you individual solutions. And finally, I'm not going to separate the emotional from the tactical. We're going to lead with vulnerability and land with strategy because you need both. That's the difference. So, who is this podcast for? And when we say protege, what do we even mean? Well, if you're a high performing individual contributor or early manager who's ready for the next level, this is for you. If you're delivering excellence in your job every day, but still not getting promoted, this is for you. If you're invisible to decision makers, even though you're delivering great work, this is for you. If you have mentors, but no one's actively advocating for you, this is for you. And if you're tired of generic advice and you want actual frameworks, this is for you. Because you're achievement oriented, but exhausted. You want data and vulnerability, not just platitudes. And you're skeptical of advice that doesn't come with a system. That's who I'm talking to. That's the protege. And if you're a leader who wants to be a better sponsor, if you want to learn how to identify and advocate for proteges, this is also for you because we need more sponsors. And part of this work is teaching people how to sponsor effectively. But the core audience, it's you. It's the woman who's been doing everything right and wondering why it's not working. Because again, it's working. You just need to play a different game. So here's what you can expect from Protégé. New episodes drop every week. Most episodes are me and you breaking down a framework, walking you through a system, short enough that you can listen to on your commute or while you're getting ready in the morning, long enough that we can go deep. Every few weeks, I'll bring on a guest who has a clear story on sponsorship or how they overcame adversity in their careers, combined with a tactical framework to share. No 40-minute storytelling sessions without actionable takeaways. If someone's on this podcast, it's because they have something specific to teach you. Because the goal here isn't just to create another podcast, it's to build a community, a place where women who are navigating the broken rung can connect, share strategies, and support each other's advancement. That takes time to build, and we're building it together. I'll be sharing more resources as we go, things like newsletters, frameworks, and tools to help you put this into practice. But for now, the focus is on giving you something valuable every single week. Okay, so that's the setup. Now, let me give you your action step for this week. Here's what I want you to do this week. Take 5 minutes and answer these three questions. Question one: when was the last time someone two levels above you saw your work directly? Not heard about it, saw it, was in the room, saw you present, saw you deliver. If the answer is more than 3 months ago or never, that's your visibility problem. Question two: who is actively advocating for you in rooms you're not in? Not your manager, beyond your manager. Who's using their political capital and their current position in the company or in the industry to push for your advancement? If you can't name someone, that's your sponsorship gap. Question three: what's one thing you're doing that's optimizing for advice when you actually need advocacy? And what this one means: are you spending all your energy building relationships with people who can't open doors? Are you focusing on execution at the expense of visibility? Are you waiting to be noticed instead of making yourself visible? Write down your answers and be honest, because here's the thing: you can't fix what you can't see. And most women are stuck because they're playing the wrong game. They're optimizing for performance when they need to optimize for advocacy. Once you see that gap, you can start to close it. And that's what we're doing over the next few episodes. We're going to close that gap and we're going to teach you how to play the game. In the next episode, we're going to break down the single most important distinction in this entire podcast: the difference between mentors and sponsors. Because here's what I've learned: most people use those words interchangeably. They say, I need to find a mentor, when what they actually need is a sponsor. And that confusion is costing you the growth that you're looking for. So, next week, we're going to talk about why most women have mentors, but almost none have sponsors. We're going to talk about how to identify who's who in your network, and also talk about what sponsors actually do, the specific actions that make someone a sponsor versus a mentor. That's next week, and it's the foundation for everything else we're going to talk about here. So make sure you're subscribed, hit follow wherever you're listening to this so that way you don't miss it. And if this resonated with you, share it with another woman who's stuck at the broken rung. Send her this episode, because the more of us who understand the game, the faster we change it. Because here's the thing: this work is hard, and you don't have to do it alone. That's why this podcast exists. That's why we're building this community together. You're a high performer, you're ready for the next level, and you're not stuck because you're not good enough. You're stuck because nobody taught you how to play the game. So let's learn it together. I'm Molly, this is Protégé, and I'll see you next week.